Welcome to the second lecture of week 12. Remember, each week there will be 2 recorded lectures you need to watch, and following each lecture is a quiz on Canvas, so 2 lectures and 2 quizzes. This is in addition to your regular character exercise report that you've been doing already and the online discussion, which is new. So I will post on Sunday night a question for the week, and you need to respond to that question and reply to some other student's response by Saturday. The question that I posted this week was, do you believe there are crimes and horrible actions that we should never forgive? Why or why not? I've already seen some really good responses to that question. By the way, if you're in my hybrid class, your online discussion is different. You already know that. In my hybrid class, you're responding to a video. If you have any questions about that in any of my sections, just let me know. And I will try to post the first lecture on Mondays and the second lecture on Wednesdays. Remember, you can also post questions for me to answer. I will pick the best questions to respond to over the week, and I'll respond over the weekend. And I'll give bonus points to the students whose questions I select. Also remember that the quizzes themselves require an access code that I will give in the recorded lecture itself. Just kind of a tricky, sneaky way for me to have you watch these, hopefully get some value from them since class has gone totally online. So this week, our discussion is still in Care for the Other, but our topic is forgiveness. And I was thinking about something that Buddha said in the Dhammapada sermons, where he taught that the only wise response to our universal predicament, human predicament of suffering, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness is compassion. And for Buddha, compassion, the key Buddhist virtue, was comprised of 4 elements. Loving kindness. Loving kindness was wanting to help others to be safe, secure, respected, and free. Sympathetic sorrow, the second element, is to feel sadness at the suffering of others. Sympathetic joy is to feel joy rather than envy at the accomplishments of others. And then benevolence is to come to see the needs of others to be as important as your own. And I think that forgiveness kind of fits here. I mean, we are all in need of forgiveness from others, I think. We have all engaged in, careless actions or spoken careless words that have offended and even perhaps harmed others. Perhaps we did this unaware. We were not intentionally giving offense. Or maybe it was intentional, but now we feel regret. I mean, let's face it, we're all imperfect. We all make mistakes. Just to live, just to be alive, is to risk offending and harming others. We've all done things, I think, we're ashamed of, and the memory might bring us emotional pain. I remember a shameful incident when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. I know that's a long time ago and sounds funny, but it still haunts me. There was this little girl in our class with cancer. The treatment for her cancer had caused her to lose all of her hair. So the teacher let her wear a hat in class, in the classroom itself. Well, one tragic day, there was a substitute teacher who did not know about this little girl's cancer nor the allowance to wear a hat. And so some children decided to have some fun. And they told the substitute teacher, right, that it was against class rules to wear a hat and that this little girl should take her hat off. The substitute teacher, of course, was confused, but she asked the little girl to please take her hat off. And I remember still how the little girl, her head dropped, and she looked down, didn't respond to the teacher. The substitute teacher asked her again. Again, she didn't respond. The class now, and I hate to admit that I joined in, began to chant, "Teacher, make her take her hat off. Teacher, make her take her hat off." I noticed the little girl at this point was starting to shake. I'm sure with fear and embarrassment, but it just egged on the students who again continued to to chant and shout to the substitute teacher to make her take her hat off. Finally, the substitute teacher went over to the little girl and she said, sweetly, she said, please, little girl, please take your hat off. Again, the little girl didn't respond, just shrunk down into her chair even more. And then the substitute teacher reached down and pulled the hat off the little girl. And she gave out a shriek because she wasn't expecting to see a bald head. Well, the little girl jumped up with tears, and crying, and she rushed out of the room. And all of the students just laughed, thinking this was hilarious. And I, regrettably, was one of those students who was having fun with this. To this day, though, I remember how horrible I felt afterwards, that I couldn't believe I had participated in that really cruel action. But this cruel deed cannot be undone. But, how I wish I could be forgiven for it. And maybe I tell this story as some sort of penance. But in any case, there can be really no hope for the future without forgiveness. The most important thing about forgiveness is it saves our future from being determined by our past. And in so doing, it can bring hope to the present. But what is forgiveness exactly? And what are the existential requirements for forgiveness? Well, we might define forgiveness in its original Greek word, just simply meant to let go. So forgiveness is letting go of anger, hate, and the demand for vengeance against the person who has harmed us. There are three existential requirements for forgiveness. First is the ideal of human dignity, the belief that each and every person is worthy of honor and respect. Second, the ideal of justice, the belief that violations of a person's dignity in any way demands accountability, a response, restitution to the victim, the one whose dignity had been violated. And then finally, third is the ideal of mercy, the belief that one should forego punishing the offender, the perpetrator, for the sake of the perpetrator's own human dignity. And only forgiveness can resolve this tension between the demand for justice and the call for mercy. Forgiveness is an act of unconditional kindness. It's an act of love. Forgiveness saves justice from becoming injustice by letting go of anger and hate and vengeance for the offender, while still holding them accountable for their bad actions. Forgiveness can make mercy accountable by seeking restitution in ways that do not harm the offender. What this means, essentially, is that forgiveness, or in forgiveness, we forgive the person, not their actions. We forgive the thief, not the theft. Or we forgive the liar, not the lie. Or we forgive the murderer, not the murder. In forgiveness, we love the person, but we hold them accountable for their actions. That's how forgiveness resolves the tension between justice and mercy, in honoring the human dignity of the offender and the offended, of the victim and the victimizer. Still, I want to make a distinction between conditional and unconditional forgiveness, as well as come back to that question, how do we forgive the unforgivable? So, two types of forgiveness. There's conditional forgiveness. That's pretty simple. Someone harms you. They recognize they've harmed you. They feel bad. They accept responsibility for their offense, and you forgive them. So forgiveness is conditional upon the other person, recognizing that they've done harm and doing penance for it or taking responsibility for it. But then there's unconditional forgiveness, This is where someone harms you. They don't feel bad or they don't accept responsibility, but you forgive them anyway. Of course, why would we want to forgive unconditionally? That might seem to be a bad idea. And here we might just go back to some of the quotes that I had you look at, and I think you already have. And I'll just look at these with you without much comment. You can kind of ask yourself what they say to you and why they might say that unconditional forgiveness is best. But Maya Angelou said, it's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself, to forgive. Forgive everybody. that denotes that unconditionality. Louis Schmid said, "To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you." This idea that when you forgive someone else, you're actually, right, you are saving your future from being determined by the past. Then we have Hannah Arendt, who we talked about as one of our brilliant women philosophers. Forgiveness is the key to action and freedom, right? Without forgiveness, we would become paralyzed. We would become inert, unable to move forward because of past bad actions. Bernard Meltzer said, "When you forgive, you in no way change the past, but you sure do change the future." In forgiveness, you don't necessarily forget the offense. You still want to honor the victims. You want to condemn the bad action and make sure it doesn't happen again. But you do love and forgive the offender. Again, Hannah Arendt said, "Forgiveness is the only way to reverse the irreversible flow of history." I love that quote. I mean, maybe it's possible that already in this course, I've offended some of you, or perhaps some of you have offended me. If we're not able to forgive one another, then any education would cease. We each need to learn to forgive. Bell Hooks said, "For me, forgiveness and compassion are always linked." How do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing and yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed? Right? When we forgive the offender, when we love the offender, we make it possible for them as well to rehabilitate their future, to not let their future be controlled and enslaved to their past. So how do we do it? Again, I won't read these. I'll just put them up here and let you read them, and you can ask yourself, perhaps, what they say to you. But I do want to talk about one last thing, and that is, how do we forgive the unforgivable? Here's a quote from Jacques Derrida, who's a very famous French philosopher. This quote really prods me to deeply reflect on the nature of forgiveness. He says, "In order to approach now the very concept of forgiveness, logic and common sense agree for once with the paradox. It is necessary, it seems to me, to begin from the fact that, yes, there is the unforgivable. Is this not in truth the only thing to forgive, the only thing that calls for forgiveness? If one is only prepared to forgive what appears forgivable, then the very idea of forgiveness would disappear. If there is something to forgive, it would be what in religious language is called mortal sin, the worst, the unforgivable crime or harm." So I would ask you to think about that. Do you agree with Derrida? To forgive minor offenses is easy. To forgive minor offenses is not even worthy of the name forgiveness. It reminds me of something that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, where he said, if you only love those who love you, what's the point? What's the challenge? Where's the reward in that? The thing is to come to love those who hate you. Well, similarly, Derrida suggests that to really practice forgiveness means you have to forgive the unforgivable. To kind of end with another quote, Richard Holloway, who wrote a fantastic book on forgiveness. And I love this quote as well, so forgive me for reading this to you. But he says, "Only unconditional, impossible forgiveness can switch off the engine of madness and revenge and invite us, with infinite gentleness, to move into the future. Until we can do that, we are exiled in the horror of the past, locked in the unspeakable nightmare. Sadly, unconditional forgiveness is beyond most of us. Even though we believe it might be the very thing that could release us, it comes when it comes at all, the way great genius suddenly visits us, an extraordinary people." Thinking about that, right, there might be two ways to make sense of grievous wrongs done to us. Two ways, perhaps, to impose order on the sometimes brutality of history. One way is to seek revenge. The other way is to be willing to forgive. I want to end this with a video clip, and hopefully it will work. But of an extraordinary woman. It's a short story about a mother of a young boy who was murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary School. This is her story, if you will, of forgiveness, forgiving the unforgivable, the murder of her own son. And I think it's just a beautiful story, though, to illustrate the power of forgiveness. And though I cannot tell you why we should forgive the unforgivable, all we can do is look at examples of people who have been able to do that. So we'll watch this, and hopefully it'll work out for us here.
Even now, 4.5 years later, the time when I really break down and I really, really am at my lowest is when I think about the massiveness of that tragedy. 20 first graders. 20? In 2 first grade classrooms? And 6 educators? It's like, it's almost too much to bear. My name is Scarlett Lewis. I'm a single mom of 2 boys. I live in Sandy Hook, Connecticut on a little farm. My youngest son, Jesse Lewis, was 6 years old when he was gunned down alongside 19 of his classmates and 6 educators in one of the worst mass murders in U.S. history. Jesse was like my little cuddle bug. His energy filled every corner of this house. He would literally come downstairs in the morning and be jumping on the couches. And that was one of the things, like, after his murder, I was thinking I'll never be able to go back to my farmhouse because his laughter and the sound of him and his energy filled every corner of this house. Evidently, when the gunman came into Jesse's room, his gun either jammed or ran out of bullets. And during the short delay, Jesse called to his classmates and told them to run. And they said that it's because he told them to run that they ran. And he was able to save 9 of his classmates' lives before losing his own. That bravery of Jesse's has really helped me, because I think about that every day when I wake up. I felt like I was attached by almost like an umbilical cord to the shooter right afterwards. And all of my personal power drained out of me in the form of anger and threw this cord into the shooter. And I was dragging him around with me everywhere. Forgiveness for me was like a big set of scissors. And I took those scissors and I cut this cord that attached me to the thing that was hurting me. But it doesn't mean that thoughts don't creep in and other things don't make me angry. Blue Angel. All sorts of little army men. Lots of them. I still find them in the garden. They come up every year. It's like he planted them. These are his soccer shoes. I was so happy that he was able to play soccer for one season. He always wanted to play soccer because his big brother played soccer. And, it still has the dirt on it from when he played. Here's the note that he left his big brother, JT. JT found this after Jesse died, and it says, "Have a lot of fun." And I thought that was such a beautiful message from a last message from a little brother to a big brother. Pretty amazing. Coming home to the farmhouse the first time to get Jesse's clothes for the funeral, and it was on my way out that I came upon this message that Jesse had left on our kitchen chalkboard. He wrote 3 words: nurturing, healing, love. When I saw those words, I knew that that was not something that was in Jesse's vernacular. I knew that was meant as a message of comfort for his family and friends. But I also knew that if Adam Lanza could have given and received nurturing, healing love, that the tragedy would never have happened. And it was in that way that I began to feel compassion for him. The reason I say Adam Lanza's name is because I think that it's vitally important that we remember that he was a human being too. and he was in a tremendous amount of pain. He experienced bullying, and he wasn't born a mass murderer. He was cultivated into what he became by his environment. And I think that we need to remember that. Everything that I do on a daily basis in this Choose Love movement, I do for my son and for the other victims, but I also do this for the Adam Lanzas of the world. I didn't write this story, I didn't start the story, but I can write the ending through forgiveness.
Well, that's a great story. Thank you for letting me share that with you. And I will end with that. Let me just share with you the access code for the quiz this week. So the quiz 2, week 12 on forgiveness. The access code is 1221. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.